call this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board to order. It's Monday, May 11th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustees Brown, I see him. I'll come back. Colebrook,
Here.
Hersey,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Jacobson, Miller,
Here.
He's at.
I'm here.
Roberts,
Here.
and Wu.
Here. We have a quorum.
Mayor Marlin,
Next up is minutes from here. Next up is minutes from the previous meeting from April 13th, 2020. Is there a motion? So moved.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve them.
approval of the minutes.
I heard Dennis move. Mary Alice second. Sure. Okay. Any corrections? Will the, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, public participation. Does anyone wish to address the Cunningham Town Board? Clerk, do we have any raised hands?
I don't see any.
Okay. All righty, committee to verify bills, town fund and GA fund.
Good evening. I hope everyone had a great Mother's Day. Thank you, Mayor Marlin, for your message. I thought that was very sweet. The town bills this last month in the town fund, we had $51,124.54 in expenditures. In the general assistance fund, we had $73,330.80 in expenditures. The total was $124,455.34 in expenditures. And just in terms of our statistics, we have 150 participants as of May 1st, up from 133. 63 are homeless. Last month, that number was 55. We did, of that homeless group, 28 have found temporary housing for COVID shelter in place since the order went into effect. It's a larger number of males, 97 men and 62 women and 0 transgender. The average age has stayed stable around 46, slightly lower than last month. We have served 265 total Urbana residents with general assistance this year. And of that, 113 have been homeless, or about 43% of the total. You'll also see in the bills that we had 4 general assistance cases, down from 5 last month. They've all been eviction prevention. We also did 8 COVID rental assistance supports reimbursed by the United Way Fund this month. Our total household serves have been 99, average of about 10 a month. I'm happy to answer any questions folks have about the bills.
Any questions for Danielle? Okay. Is there a motion to place on file?
Motion to place bills on file.
Second.
Second?
We need to approve the town fund.
Okay. Motion to approve the town fund. Jared?
Motion to approve. Sorry, I'm leaning my mic.
There seems to be a. And was that Sharice as a second?
Yeah, second.
All right. Any further discussion? All those, do we need a roll call, Charlie? Fred?
No, nothing.
No, but you also need to approve the general assistance fund, not just the town fund.
That's correct.
It was
So
the general.
I'll make a motion to approve the general assistance fund as well.
I'll second.
All right. So we have, let's just take them individually since they were made individually. All those in favor of approving the town fund, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. We also have a motion for approving the general assistance fund. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes. Reports of officers.
So as you see in my my supervisor memo, which went out on Thursday, our COVID rental assistance fund, which is countywide, is specifically for folks who are unemployed due to COVID. This includes undocumented families. We dedicated 7,000 and United Way and Community Foundation dedicated 20,000. We've served, as of the time of this memo, there's actually a number since, 17 households to date. I think as of today, I looked and we're at 23. And at the time, there were 99 calls for rental assistance. So we are seeing that program starting to take off. We also prepared for the town board the assistance increases. You'll see that essentially before we did case closures, we were at 158. I then closed 8 cases, most of them for people who have moved out of the township or gotten on Social Security, since we are not doing terminations due to the community work program. The Angel Donor Fund continues to bring in funds. We have raised a little over 32,000. 23,000 of that has come in since COVID. And we continue to provide weekly bucket brigade stay-at-home provisions with toiletries and resource guides to the community. We've expanded that to include the school district area. So we do have some folks in mobile home parks to the northeast, and some folks who are with children in Urbana schools who are sheltering in Champaign. We've delivered over 211 buckets, serving almost 400 people. We also are working very hard in partnership with the continuum of service providers to really look to make sure that we can move homeless residents into more permanent and stable housing during this time. So we'll be meeting again this week on Wednesday, but we continue to help people apply for subsidized housing opportunities. And we are working with the Housing Authority, which is now allowing those who have been homeless in a shelter in the last 14 days to move to the top of wait lists. This is a really important change that is allowed now by HUD policy under the in response to COVID-19, and hopefully we can move there'll be about 70 vouchers through that and a number of vouchers through Regional Plan Commission. So we're really hoping that in addition to addressing the crisis that is COVID, we can try to move people into some permanent housing and address the long-term homelessness problem while keeping the community safe and the homeless residents safe. Just want to let folks know who are listening that Green Street is closed. You probably saw that. That also means the access to the township building has been changed, and therefore we're asking people to enter to access the township from the alley off of Ray Street rather than from Green Street. We do have very light foot traffic these days, so this was probably good timing for the M4 project since we have less folks than usual coming to our building. Our staff do remain on the premises and open. We are answering phone calls. We are greeting walk-ups through a video doorbell system. And we continue to pass checks to homeless residents in safe ways. I also want to announce that as of very recently, public health is now testing any resident who is an essential worker having contact with the public. And so anyone who is in contact with the public can call 239-7877 and basically be directed to receive testing. And I believe that is free testing in the community. I'm happy to answer any questions about this last month's activity. It's been a very busy time at Township.
Diane, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Danielle, I was hoping you could expand upon what the COVID Relief Rental Assistance Fund actually does, if you could tell everybody.
Absolutely. So the COVID Rental Assistance Program, and there is a link in the supervisor memo to the RPC website, but essentially this was we launched this in partnership on March 25th, and it's 1 month of rental assistance. So whatever they're paying for a month on their lease, we would provide for individuals and families that have been laid off due to the pandemic. It's a one-time payment up to $700 maximum. And it's for people who essentially do not qualify for unemployment insurance. Because as you know, the federal government has added a bonus on unemployment. So folks are generally taken care of. But for those who are undocumented, for those who do not qualify for unemployment, cash economy, other kinds of things, essentially as long as they live in Champaign County, they're not receiving any housing subsidies and they had earned income prior to the governor's shelter in place order. And they can up to 250% of the federal poverty level. They can essentially call the hotline that we have set up with our RPC has set up a hotline, and that number is 877-548-4205, and that's the number that people can call to be routed either to COVID rental assistance, or if they do have income, they will be routed to our standard countywide program. That phone's been ringing off the hook.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Bill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm encouraged, especially because the township has such a good background experience in working with a lot of various agencies that are receiving additional federal and state money to help support people. So I think by leveraging that money with our expertise in the township, I think that's really important. I had a couple questions on the, it's really encouraging that people could get out of the shelters because that's a big public health risk to have people in crowded conditions. Just wondering if there would be enough, if there's been discussion, if there'd be vouchers to also kind of prioritize people that are living in crowded conditions, like 2 families in 1 house, to try to, if they're already on the waiting list, to get them moved up in the list. And is this part of the CDBG money, the new money that's coming for that you've been discussing at the continuum of care meetings?
So a couple of things. First, the housing authority received money specifically to PHAs. Excuse me 1 second. My dog is whining. I'm so sorry, he got trapped and he was letting me know that. The specific announcement through the housing authority is from monies that came to public housing authorities, and they're using that to expand the vouchers by 50. And it's really going to be specifically for anyone who has stayed in the shelter within the last 15 days of 14 days as of their announcement last week. The over occupancy issue is a huge issue when I talk about women with children being left out of a lot of the homeless services. I'm referring to that problem. So there's two definitions of homelessness. The HUD definition of homelessness, which does not consider people who are doubled up or tripled up to be homeless, even if they're sleeping on couches or, you know, floors or whatever in attics, as long as that's not considered an issue. Including if they're staying with people with Section H vouchers and they're not allowed to stay there, they're not considered homeless. There is the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, and this is a homelessness that recognizes women and children specifically who are homeless and really doubled up and tripled up. There's been a long-standing kind of federal fight at the level of Congress to expand the definition of homelessness. There are forces that don't want the United States to look like it has a large homeless population, and therefore they try to keep the definition very tight. And then there are those who want to serve people who are homeless, and they are trying to expand the definition. So to answer your question, Bill, the PHA money is specifically going to be for folks who have stayed in shelter in the last 14 days, so it would not include doubled and tripled up. That said, you as city council members will be discussing soon the use of CDBG funds. I know that the staff will be bringing you different, and I've been in many, many emails with Sheila. She's been very engaged throughout this process. So I know that you'll be looking at some of the options for those monies. I know that the big issue right now is the outbreak in Rantoul Foods, and we have, as of this afternoon, 82 positive cases out of 700 employees at that location. And a portion of those employees live in Champaign-Urbana. I believe it's 30% of the employees actually live in Champaign or Urbana. So it's a public health crisis that's near to home, and it's something that we need to address the issue of concentration and densification. But there are not a lot of tools to do that right now, except, and this is my last statement, it's very important for the public to know, both City of Champaign Township and Cunningham Township consider families that are doubled and tripled up with children to be homeless for our rental assistance program. And he recently changed his rules so that he could address that population, and we have historically addressed that population. So we are going to be getting the word out. I called Rantoul Township Supervisor, Mr. Rusk, and we're talking tomorrow. I want to let him know about that program. I'm reaching out to all the immigrant rights groups, and I'll be reaching out to the homeless service providers, and I announced this to public health. So for those who have the money to actually de-densify and support 2 households, there is that deposit assistance or first month rent assistance. So we're hoping that we can help some individuals that way, but there really is a longer term need that can't be addressed from our program, to be very honest.
Thank you, that helps a lot. The other question I had is about the Bucket Brigade. I know there's other organizations that do food distributions. I don't know how many of them are doing deliveries. Is there any way to coordinate with them to make sure our clients get on their lists as well? And is the Bucket Brigade, is that red herring meals? It looked like there were some charges for.
Yes. So so our specific Bucket Brigade is a partnership with the Channing Murray Foundation, where we pay at cost for meals. There's 3 meals if you're a single or double. If you have 4 or more people, we deliver additional meals to their houses. They also, with the meal, bring a bucket of 2 weeks of provisions and guides, toiletries, a face mask, etc. And so that partnership has been going for the last 6 weeks. I'm in close conversation with what is it called? See You Together, and other agencies that provide food. And for those that have additional needs, we do direct them. But we also have a number of partners directing people to our program as well. There doesn't there's still a lack of food support in the community. So we're all partnering together the best we can to meet that need.
That's great. I know one size doesn't fit all, and especially if someone's in a hotel or someplace where they don't have a kitchen, they need to have prepared meals. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Wayne Williams, did you have a report?
Really quickly, as many of you know, property tax bills came in the mail last week, and our phones have been ringing, and we're doing our best to answer every single call and answer every single message we get. We are still in the process of doing our revaluations, and that's it. Oh, I would like to know when someone does call the assessor's office, I know this will sound cliche, there's not much we can do about the tax bill per se. All we can do is adjust the assessment. So when you're looking at your tax bill, pay close attention to two numbers, the assessed value, and right above that on your tax bill, the estimated fair cash value. If you think the estimated fair cash value is too high, give our office a call. Let's see what you can do. If you think it's too low, congratulations. That's it.
Questions, Mary Alice?
So I know that some people, when they opened up their tax bill, no longer had their homestead exemption. Is that something that your office puts on the bills, or is that something that the county does?
So generally homestead exemptions, the general homestead exemption, also known as owner-occupied exemption, those stay on. There are a couple cases where they don't. If it's a renter's exemption, you have to renew every year. The senior exemption is one that you have to reapply for every year. So if you don't reapply for your senior exemption or your senior freeze, you won't get it the following year. And that's a county policy, not a township assessor policy.
So if it did for some reason fall off your homestead, what should somebody do then?
You should.
It shouldn't change, right? So.
I'm sorry?
I said it shouldn't change. It should be correct. But if it's not correct and for some reason it has been changed, who is the party responsible for updating that?
If it's just the senior exemption, you'd call the county assessor, and their number is
the homestead exemption.
So again, the homestead exemption generally doesn't fall off. There's some cases where so you're not allowed to have two homestead exemptions if you have two different homes, right? So there's some cases where we have found people that have more than one homestead exemption, and those were removed. But if it's a homestead exemption, you can call our office or the county assessor. And our office number is 217-367-7059. The county assessor is 217-384-3760.
All right.
Bill had his hand up, and then Eric.
Yeah, I posted a note for people to check because that happened to me. My homestead I've lived in the same house for 25 years, and my homestead exemption disappeared. But I was able to call the number on the tax bill, and she was a little confused at first. It must have been some kind of fluke, some kind of computer glitch or something. Haven't heard of a lot of people that happening to, but I called and she said to go ahead and make the first payment and they would send me a corrected bill. So it wasn't a big deal for me.
Eric?
I'm a little puzzled by the requirement for exemptions based on age that you would have to reapply each year because you don't get younger.
I am too, Eric.
Okay.
Any other questions?
And let me be clear, that requirement's a county requirement. It's not
Sure.
The law allows for the county to opt out of that. That does not happen. I would encourage you to call your county board members. I've sent a letter to the county board chair, but did not get a response regarding this issue. I was planning on sending the same letter to the county executive. I think it's ridiculous. Over more than half of the counties do not require seniors to annually reapply for their senior exemption.
Okay, sounds like a good issue for the county board to take up. Any other questions for Wayne? Thanks, Wayne. Is there any unfinished business? All right, we'll move on to new business. Ordinance number T2020-05-001. The ordinance approving the annual budget and appropriation ordinance for FY 2020 to 2021. Danielle?
Thank you. So right before this meeting, I sent you the draft budget, which we'll be asking for you to put on file as of May 13th. There's a News Gazette announcement that will go out and it'll be posted on the website, on our website. It'll be available at our office and at the clerk's office. I thought that I would give you kind of a short overview of the presentation. And then I'll be reaching out to ask. You'll have 5 weeks to review the budget, provide any input you'd like to give, ask whatever questions. The public hearing, because of the 30-day notice requirement, usually we don't have 30 days between town board meetings. And so we are asking for a reschedule of the regular meeting from June 8th to June 15th to allow that 30-day process to take place. If you, for some reason, were not able to access your, I see there's not a chat in Zoom. So since you may have not been able to access your email, if you go to tinyurl.com/township budget, you will also see a version of the budget, the draft budget. So just in case you're having trouble with email, tinyurl.com/township budget will also get you there. So essentially, I just want to hit the top points. I've talked a lot about the situation of poverty and housing insecurity. There's a whole page there for you. The pieces I want to drill into are really what is relevant for this coming year. We will continue to keep general assistance payments at $300 a month. That went up from $265 for the last 4 or 5 years, up to the $300. City of Champaign Township GA payments are now $304. You will see that we've had a rise. It was a larger bump in 2019, but we'll, by the end of the year, be probably funding at about the same level. We do anticipate a pretty significant increase in general assistance. Honestly, that's the biggest change. I anticipate 190 clients on average. I'm really hopeful that we can keep it at that. The budget then to cover that 190 clients at $300 a month, we're at budgeting $684,000. I've also increased the rental assistance budget. I expect, especially when the eviction stay is lifted, that we will have a number of eviction prevention and rental assistance requests. We're estimating 200 Urbana households will be served at an average of 600. It is the case, however, that because of the CDBG funds, state and federal dollars, there's a lot of different partners coming to the table. We may not need that full amount. And maybe in a month, within this month, I might have a better sense of what that budget could look like. But I have budgeted liberally, I guess, for rental assistance. I have unfortunately had to go down in consolidated social service funding as we see rises in GA and RA even before COVID. We're looking at $100,000 for consolidated social service funding. At this time, because it's such a moving target, I know I've been in conversations with Sheila and Melissa to try to understand, what the best approach is. as some of the programs that had applied for that fund won't be able to function at the level or with the same design as they had when they applied. So we will be returning to you with some information about our suggestions going forward with that fund, but we're still looking at making that allocation. I did set aside some other funds in terms of grants to address emerging needs. That we believe that, you know, as things are changing, it's very difficult to predict the future. So we've set aside $68,000 in emerging need situations. I have increased staff hours slightly, but as you'll see, there's really no increase in staff costs beyond anticipated rise in healthcare. So we've basically we have a number of people who are working part-time as per their choice, and that does help us to control our staffing costs. I have increased the budget for bus passes because they're an entitlement of general assistance participants, and we expect an increase with that, but it's not particularly significant. I have been able to come down on our internship program some. I think we'll keep the same level of interns, but we had a smaller than expected expenditure this year. And I am anticipating more angel donor expenses as we see more angel donor funds coming in. I think we'll see Social Security recovery payments, which really ballooned this last year thanks to our SOAR advocate part-time position. We expect to capture about $25,000 in the next year, and that covers that position. So that's wonderful. We over doubled the income from the year before with additional advocacy around that. So that's been great. We are considering a direct mailing to Urbana households about our services, particularly in light of the increasing need of general assistance and rental assistance. Honestly, and as you know, there's a lot of people who are facing unemployment or insecurity in their rent, sometimes really for the first time in their life. And it's important that people know the township is there for Urbana residents, and that's what their dollars go towards. I think the only other thing I would mention is, you know, we did do a decrease, or we did a payout with Carl Hospital. And so you'll see that balance in terms of that fund has decreased. Wayne, I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to add from your memo. I'll kick it to you if you want to add anything.
I'll just kind of go over the top lines. Overall, the assessor's budget, I'm looking for an increase of just over 2%. Though the vast majority of that is to purchase a new server for our office. And I'm still getting quotes on that expense. What you're gonna see is when this fiscal year is over, I am gonna vastly underspend this fiscal year, which is a good thing. A lot of that to do with we didn't get the amount of appeals, commercial appeals, despite a rather hefty increase in commercial assessments. However, I kept that line item even because there's likely going to be another increase in commercial assessments. So we want to be prepared in case we need to get appraisals and defend our assessments. Any questions? Oh, the healthcare line. I am anticipating a 10% increase in healthcare, but you'll see that the line is even to last year because of a change in an employee mix.
Any questions for Wayne?
I would like to add that we are reaping some of the benefits of paying down our unfunded IMRF liability. Our IMRF employer contribution is lower than it has been since I or Danielle have both started here at the township.
Jared and then Mary Alice.
Wayne, I had a general question that I guess would go to you and Danielle, since both of your budgets are in this, and that's, I mean, I guess we don't really know where funds for the city and the taxing bodies in general, how they're going to be affected by COVID. And, obviously we're going to be impacted. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Are both of your budgets, I know Danielle, you said you had $68,000 set aside, but it sounds like it's kind of earmarked to be for needs rather than budget shortfalls. Are we anticipating a 5% decrease, a 10% decrease? Are we anticipating any of that in these budgets you guys are proposing?
I think that the tax assessments are out for this year, so I would assume that we would see decreases in the year after. Certainly the grants program is a place where the other grants program is a place for contraction if need be. I've also listed in the section about the levy, I've shown that essentially, as I have mentioned to you before, we have originally saw general assistance go back to its historic averages, which is higher than the total tax levy because of a reduction in the tax levy in 2015. And now with COVID, we're seeing a spike. And we could see, as I said, up to 190, maybe even 200 general assistance participants. If that's the case, I basically laid out some options. One is to reduce costs with the potential elimination or constriction of programs and possible cuts in staff. So, that social service funding would be likely a target. And I could tighten the general assistance qualifications. We could also increase income through a levy increase. And I'm also working to get the township GATA compliant so that we would be available to receive state grants specifically for the purposes of our participants. So I'm definitely looking at other income sources outside of the levy. But I do expect if there's a decrease, and Wayne can speak to this as well, that we would see that in the years after there had been contestation of property values. All bets are on the table basically. And the way township functions is I'd like to provide as much support as I can to participants in need. And when that is not possible, we have to constrict the program requirements and potentially close programs if needed.
Diane, before you have a motion, there's an error in the agenda entry. This is not a motion for an ordinance approving the budget and appropriation ordinance. It's a motion to designate the tentative budget. Then
to designate, can you repeat that?
Motion to designate the tentative budget.
Designate the tentative budget. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add, the main source of our revenue is property taxes. Historically, property taxes are a very stable revenue source for government. We don't rely at all on sales tax. We rely on a little bit of personal property replacement tax, which is that particular income stream is more tied to the economy. We rely a little bit on interest income, very little bit on interest income. And while we were able to increase that through better negotiations with our banks, we live in a time where interest rates are near zero. But again, we don't rely that much on, our main source is property taxes, and that's a very stable source for government.
Okay, any other questions? Mary Alice.
Danielle, I'm wondering, can you tell us roughly what you expect the balance to be after your proposed amounts for your budget? Because I know that we've been spending down what we've had in surplus. I'm wondering what the bottom line in surplus would be if this budget was passed.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you want to go to the very last page of the budget, there's a beginning balance and an ending balance. And then you can also look by fund Each fund has a beginning balance and an ending balance, and that's also in the listed in the ordinance as well. So essentially, if we were to, the beginning balance that's listed here, so that you know, is our anticipated balance at the end of this fiscal year. So we essentially looked at where we believe we'd be at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1, and then the ending balance after the expenditures that have been made. So we were at 1.84 approximately, and that goes down to 1.11.
So if the budget is passed as is, basically what we have in savings would be 1.1 million? That's what
yes,
I'm hearing.
I believe,
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and you know, that is about where we want to be. I mean, we actually, that would give us, you know, essentially a full year in the bank. Some of that balance, I believe that balance excludes the Carl Hospital and OSF set-asides. So we pull out that piece, which we've set aside into a savings account. And I believe it also excludes $150,000 capital fund, which you approved last year. But it would be the remaining piece. I think the big issue, if you look at the general assistance, the bump from what is, you know, in the past been 300,000 to almost 700,000 is a huge piece of that. So if you look between the funds, the town fund is almost balanced. It's that almost all of the deficit is in the general assistance fund. And that's the piece that it's a combination of the reduction of the levy by 250 and then the increase in services and demand. That's basically where you get that shortfall, that budget shortfall.
So just, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's okay. I was
So-
just gonna,
Go ahead, Mary Alice.
so as I look at this, if I look at the general assistance fund, we have 1.2 million projected as the beginning balance.
Mhm.
We will receive 400,000 next year, right? Am I looking at that correctly? And then we are estimating that the estimate of expenses for each of the aforementioned, we're estimating is spending 1.1 in general assistance next year.
Correct. So you take that beginning balance and you take the deficit spending and general assistance, that's where you get the end balance.
Okay. All right. So we would be down to 574,000 in the general assistance fund at the end of.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that's where the large deficit, if you look at the other fund, there's a smaller deficit that shows up. That said, as Wayne has mentioned before, you know, he's in the middle of a quad year, and so he's added an additional staff member for this current year and next year, the field staff member. And so my understanding in conversation with him is that after that work is complete, that he would go down as a staff member. And I may also need to remove one of my part-time staff members at that point as well. So that would balance some of the equation. And then essentially we just need to figure out, are we going to increase the levy, or are we going to constrain the criteria for our programs and address the social service funding? So I think that's really the decision point that we've been heading toward for a while. And I certainly welcome the town board's input on that process. You know, in my opinion, the public holds the township in a very high esteem, as evidenced from the Angel Donor Fund activity, from the amount of kind of press and support that we've received from Urbana. And if the citizens of Urbana would like to vote to restore that GA fund, then we could continue to provide general assistance. And if the citizens would like to say, no, we want to keep it as is, then we're in a position where we have to constrict. And I believe that process could either be done through a ballot referendum or through the town board voting to put it on the ballot to discuss a levy. So I think that's something that, just in the larger scheme of things, I would like to discuss with the town board, whether or not it makes sense for us to try to restore the levy at this time when we're facing such an increased need.
Eric?
So nothing, no new insights, but I just want to see if I understand an outline. This coming year, we're going to take down a little over half of the funds that we have for general assistance, from 1.2 million to 400,000. And obviously that can't continue for yet another year. So
Correct.
you're saying at that point there's a hopefully there's a choice, at least a somewhat difficult choice, but hopefully by that time there will be a readily available vaccine and economic activity and jobs will be restored to close to normal. Am I understanding?
Yes, I mean,
the whole thing?
I have budgeted for a, I'm hoping we will consider it a worst case scenario. I budgeted for 200 households to receive general assistance, up from 100. And I've budgeted for 190 people to be on our rolls, which we have seen historically at other times when we were in recession. And with those two things, one being a new program and one being an old program, we would, we would reduce the fund balance. I think what I guess I'm saying is, in this moment, given that we do have a healthy fund balance, because of low general assistance rolls over that 4-year period when Ms. Mayo was supervisor, I think that we should, as a township, invest in helping people during this COVID crisis. And that's a good use of that surplus, which was stored up over that time frame. I certainly do not consider this to be a balanced budget or sustainable, but I would say this is an investment that we're making in this next year to support our residents. And then we will either need to increase, and they're, both through the levy and through grants, we should be looking at that increase. And then, or we could do a significant decrease to make sure we're back to a balanced budget. And I'd like to try for one, but if we need to do the second, I'm ready to do that as township supervisor.
Bill Brown?
Turn on your mic.
Yeah, I'll move to designate the tentative budget for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 and place it on file.
Is there
I'll
a
second
second?
that.
Moved by Bill Brown, seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? Is this a roll call vote, Fred?
No.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion passes. Second motion is to reschedule the regular meeting of June 8th to June 15th, 2020, and this would also begin at 6:30 p.m.
Okay, I'd make the motion that we reschedule that meeting for June. As
Second.
indicated.
Was that Jared?
That was me.
Okay. Moved by Dennis, seconded by Jared. All those in, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion passes. And with no further business before the town board meeting, we are adjourned, and this will be followed by the Urbana City Council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so much.
Danielle.
Everyone stay safe.
You
Thank you.
too.
Whenever you're ready, Charlie.
All
You
set.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council for Monday, May 11th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown,
Here.
Colebrook,
Here.
Hersey,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Miller,
He's muted.
Roberts,
Here.
Wu,
Here.
Mayor Marlin,
Here.
Miller's here.
Councilman Miller.
He's back.
Okay.
Next is approval of minutes from the previous meeting of April 27th. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
A second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any additions, any corrections to the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Next item on the agenda are public input and presentations. Before we take public input, I wanted to make a statement to address some of the concerns that have been raised over the past few weeks. Following public input, there will be 2 presentations on our update on the financial impact of COVID-19, as well as an update on the business outreach and comp plan activities that have been taking place so far. And after that, there will be a proclamation on National Historic Preservation Month. So this is a memo to the Urbana City Council, and I will be providing a copy of this after the meeting. I just didn't finish it in time to get it out before. The interaction between Ms. Alea Lewis and Urbana police officers has raised questions and concerns in the community. A portion of the incident was recorded and posted to Facebook by a member of the public. This took place on April 10th, 2020. To date, I wanted to go over the following steps which have been taken to address concerns, and as appropriate, these first steps are internal. Number 1, the UPD investigation into the shooting incident has been completed. Number 2, Urbana Police Chief Brian Serafin, Lieutenant Jason Norton, and City Administrator Carol Mitten briefed City Council members during the week of April 20th on the incident. The UPD Use of Force Review Board report was provided to the Urbana City Council on April 27th. It had concluded that officer actions were within departmental policy and procedure. State's Attorney Office also provided an opinion that the officer's actions complied with state law. Urbana Police Chief Brian Serafin and Lieutenant Jason Norton presented an overview of the incident to the Urbana City Council on April 27th, 2020. Included in the presentation was body camera, dash cam video from the incident. The video footage was cleared for release by the Champaign County State's Attorney's Office, and the State's Attorney also participated in the presentation on April 27th and answered questions from the City Council. Over the past few weeks, elected officials have received many emails and messages. I've read every message received on this topic. I've met with leadership of the Urbana Police Department and city administration several times, and have spoken on the phone with a number of community leaders. On Friday, May 8th, 2020, I convened a Zoom meeting of the following people: Ms. Minnie Pearson, President, the Champaign County NAACP; Chief Robert Moore, retired, United States Marshal and Chair of the Criminal Justice Committee of the Illinois NAACP State Conference; Ms. Carol Spindell, President of the Champaign County ACLU; Reverend Florence Kaplow, Unitarian Universalist Church Urbana; Mr. Tracy Parsons, City of Champaign Community Relations Manager and Compliance Officer, and he was representing also the Champaign County Community Coalition. And from the City of Urbana, attending were Ms. Vasilia Clark, Human Relations Officer, Urbana Police Chief Brian Serafin, and Urbana Police Lieutenant Joel Sanders, and myself. We had a frank dialogue centering on what happened on April 10th and identifying steps that we could take to increase trust, improve relationships and communication between law enforcement officials, the city, and people we serve. The group identified 3 areas as a top priority to focus on next. So I wanted to describe what the next steps will be. The first area of focus was charges against Aaliyah Lewis. Ms. Lewis is currently charged with 3 counts of aggravated battery against a police officer and 1 count of felony resisting arrest. I want to make sure the public understands that any decisions on the actual charges that are pursued in the case lie with the Champaign County State's Attorney's Office. The city does not have the power or the authority to drop charges in this case. However, we do have the ability to advocate for certain outcomes. And I am going to be advocating that, and I believe that Ms. Lewis should be offered resources and services such as that available through the drug court option at the county level. And I'm going to advocate for this and other options. The state's attorney has also publicly supported these alternatives as an option for Ms. Lewis. And she stated as much in the April 27th City Council meeting. So I urge Ms. Lewis and her attorney to consider pursuing these alternatives in order to get help and support. Secondly, it was a top priority for an independent review of the incident to take place. And it always helps to have a set of fresh eyes and objective look at an incident that has raised so many concerns. So the city of Urbana will pursue an independent third-party review of the incident from the time that the police responded to a witness's call for service for shots fired to the time that UPD transferred custody of 2 people to the Champaign County Sheriff's Department. I want to remind the public the city has no authority to review any events that subsequently occurred in the Champaign County Jail. And I also don't want any of us to lose sight of the fact of how this incident began. Urbana police responded to a resident's 911 call to report a shooting. A bullet went over the heads of bystanders and through the window of a first-floor apartment which was occupied at the time. Thankfully, no one was hurt in the shooting. The 911 caller reported seeing a man with a gun outside an apartment building on Colorado Avenue and also reported that a woman was with him. Ultimately, 2 people were taken into custody. One of them was armed and was arrested without incident. The other individual resisted arrest. 2 other people were questioned and released at the scene related to this. The third area that we are focusing on are the 10 shared principles that were developed by the Illinois NAACP State Conference and the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police a few years ago, well, a couple of years ago, I guess. The city of Urbana will work with the state and county NAACP, the Champaign County Community Coalition, members of the public to host a public workshop. In this workshop, we'll explore the 10 shared principles to use as a guide to the relationship between law enforcement and the people they serve in the city of Urbana, with the goal of bringing these principles to the Urbana City Council for affirmation. And additionally, I wanted to let the public know that the City of Urbana Community Outreach Coordinator position was recently vacated. The position description is being updated and will be posted. This is a full-time civil service position reporting to the Human Relations Officer in the Department of Human Resources and Finance. The position serves as a liaison between the city and the community with an emphasis on fostering productive police-community relationships, public education, and youth involvement. It's a very important position, and we will work to fill it as soon as possible. And again, I'd like to say thank you to the community members. I appreciate the guidance and input we've received over the past few weeks. As always, in the city of Urbana, we will base our decisions on facts, and we will protect the rights and recognize the responsibilities of all involved. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public input. Charlie, would you like to read the emails received?
Yes, I have 11 of them. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, first one is from Bronwyn Kane. Having read and watched several accounts of the assault committed by Urbana Police Department officers upon a young woman they arrested on April 10th, I am writing to ask that you please consider taking further action in addressing the misconduct, criminal abuse that was so clearly perpetrated by officers on that day. I worked as a legal assistant for several years. I am not unfamiliar with police procedure during arrests. I have never seen something as disturbing locally as the footage shown here. The only thing I could possibly compare it to would be the reading would be reading the transcripts from Kawani Carrington's last moments with CPD. And I assure you that it feels like a miracle that things did not end in the same way for this young person, that they did not, not be considered a victory. The trauma she clearly suffered will be with her for the rest of her life. I want to say, make this right. I feel that there is almost zero likelihood, sadly, in this being the approach taken. At the very least, could we not make it worse? Could we not make it worse? The charges against her should be dropped. I know this isn't your wheelhouse, but it is something you could advocate for. This would be a step toward doing the right thing. I'm attaching 2 more sophisticated pleas or accounts for your review, and those refer to the IMC article, recent article, and the News Gazette opinion by Minnie Pearson. Next is a letter from Kate McDowell. This one's a little long. Dear Mayor Marlin, Police Chief Brian Seraphim, I'm writing because I'm concerned about the recent incident in which a citizen was arrested by the police in Urbana. I've read the guest commentary by Minnie Pearson in the NAACP and watched the video of Alea Lewis's arrest. I've also read that the man who took the video has been asked by police to delete the video in a local source I trust. That's in reference to the IMC article. I teach storytelling and data storytelling at the School of Information Science at the University of Illinois, and I have some questions about this story and situation. So far, the official response has been that protocol was followed. It's really hard for me to reconcile that information with the above article and linked video. Let me ask some questions as a citizen of Urbana. 1, what does a person say while walking toward police cars that results in being tackled face down on the street? Was it, I am going home, as the Public Eye article states? I ask for all of us in that I don't want to say the wrong thing and end up tackled and arrested, just as Sharice Hersey asked at City Council. 2, what was said or what was the context? Basically, what protocols were followed in tackling a woman who was walking toward a group of police cars with nothing in her hands? In other words, can you help me understand how police officers saw one woman alone as a threat that required full restraint? 3, is punching, kneeing a woman who is already being held down by 2 officers protocol? If so, would you please revise this protocol? 4, is knocking someone out of their shoes and leaving their shoes on the street protocol? One officer appears to pause, considering whether to help her get her shoe back on, and then walks away from the shoe. This is such a sad moment in the video. She's being held down already. Surely it would have been possible to help her with her shoe. 5, what is going on with the way the officer pulled her shoulders? Is pulling someone's shoulders back at right angle while they are being sat upon protocol? What protocol says to hyperextend the shoulders? If there is such a protocol, please revise it, because anyone I know would be injured by such an extreme stretch while already under stress and a full body trap. These questions about shoes and shoulders lead me to this question. Is it the goal of city police officers to induce or increase a sense of helplessness or panic? Can you please help me understand what police are and are not taught about trauma and panic? I mean this sincerely. I ask as a citizen, please help me understand by sending me police training information. And she provides her email address. 7, the Public Eye article indicates that a recording captured an officer asking the arrested woman to be like a lady. Why does the officer suggest that she act like a lady? Is it protocol to insist on ladylike behavior? Do police officers in our city understand sexism? I apologize if this sounds judgmental. I really mean it as a deep concern, because this is tremendously concerning for women, for folks who do not conform to binary gender roles, for anyone whose gender is different or unusual, and even for police officers who may be acting from stereotype or ignorance. 8, would you please ask the police officers when arresting one person with 4 or more police officers, or less if safe, to help people get their shoes back on before putting them in a car? If I had been treated like this, I'd be afraid that I was about to be killed in broad daylight. Of course, I like to hope that I wouldn't kick a police car, but honestly, I might if I were tackled and punched and made to be barefoot with what appears to be literally zero concern for my life. When I watch this video, all I can think is that I would assume that the police believe my life was trash and I would be preparing to die. Please show people that their lives matter. Give them their shoes. Please help me and all the citizens of Urbana understand exactly what makes this okay, or go back and fix it and make it right. However, if protocols include the punching of a person held face down in the street is okay, then please revise police protocols to be more aligned with what exactly is needed to de-escalate a situation. You may have hard work ahead. I'm copying Vasilia Clark as well, and ask that this letter be shared with the Civilian Police Review Board. The next one is from Julie Watkins. To City Council. I find violence upsetting, especially violence by armed persons against an unarmed person. I find excuses for committing violence upsetting and disappointing. The full USA context is that some police act as if they can do violence with impunity, and there are many times they get away with even killing. And there are a few other police who would not do this publicly, telling the police who do to stop. The more this happens nationwide, the less benefit of the doubt I will allow to local police when there is disturbing video evidence, unless the local administration is being a local leader against violence. I don't consider making excuses leadership. It is upside down to demand better behavior of civilians than police. It is upside down to validate violent force in response to verbal questions, even if loud. Next is from Paul Muth. Greetings. The police training is lamentably lacking. I have heard some good things about PTI curriculum. If that is where Urbana goes for training, sessions need to be extended and actually affect interactions with the public. River Brown, dear City Council members, I am still deeply concerned about the April 10th incident, and I'm hopeful that the City Council will continue to push for justice. First of all, I am so grateful to hear the Council consider all of our community's input on this matter. Please continue to keep your hearts and minds open. Please consider how this situation might affect you if, instead of Aaliyah, this was your child, your partner, your sister. You have the power to appoint a different police chief. Please make it clear that his reappointment depends on dropping all charges against Aaliyah. I have taken upon myself to watch a small part of the clip posted after the fact. Search on YouTube, Good Friday, Urbana 41020. It is even worse than I thought it would be. It is hard to watch. I strongly encourage every single City Council member to watch both videos. If you have not, please watch them both. Also, please push for the body cam videos to be released to the public. I understand FOIAs have been filed for these. Again, please make it very clear to the Chief of Police that his reappointment depends on dropping all charges against Aaliyah. Stop the violence here and now. Next is Jeffrey Putney, Champaign. Let me start with some updates from the past week concerning the 410 incident of police violence. The Public Eye published an article detailing a history of events and public concerns. Minnie Pearson, the president of Champaign County NAACP, wrote a guest column in the News Gazette calling for further investigation. I would encourage everyone to read these. I've also heard that from fellow community members that the Urbana police went to the home of the person who recorded the 410 incident of police violence and asked or suggested he remove the video from Facebook. Using officers to attempt to remove evidence of police violence from the public record is reprehensible. Police intervention always implies the threat of state violence. I would ask that you demand this claim be investigated and those responsible be held accountable. I've also learned that a FOIA request asking for all of the body cam footage from the incident have been denied. So far, we have only seen the selected minutes of the video that the police deemed acceptable to share. We know that it is the moments before and after an incident that can help tell the broader story. So I am asking for help from the council to ensure all the footage is released. I appreciate that council members are sharing the public's concern and showing interest in taking action around this matter. And I'm glad to hear that things like independent investigations are being discussed. But I fear that in the end, an investigation may only serve to legally protect the city. What I'm asking for is leadership and action that helps support and protect the community member who was assaulted by police. The city still has plans for further state violence enacted through felony prosecution and prison time. We all must find ways to put a stop to this. I'm asking that council members do what they can to ensure the charges are dropped. And finally, I just want to mention that the City Council is responsible for approving the appointment of the police chief. I would ask that you make it clear to him that his reappointment depends on how he handles this case. Thank you again for your time. Next is Elizabeth Simpson. Dear council members, in regard to the April 10 incident with UPD, I'm heartened to hear that some of you are listening to my and others' profound concerns for the health of our community, physically, but also psychologically and emotionally. This incident has once again induced terror in many citizens of CU, and we need you to show that this matters and that you will take right action to remedy the harm. Having just watched the more recent footage, I am absolutely terrified to see that about minute 140, an officer runs over with a gun raised and proceeds to jump onto Miss Lewis's body with gun loose and flying around. At minute 205, there are 3 large men around Miss Lewis who is face down on the ground. One of them is sitting on Miss Lewis and the other 2 are at each side, apparently engaging her hands. She says, "You are racist," and the officer on top of her immediately raises himself to knee her with his weight, at which time his rifle also flails and lands against her body. This response is horrifying and blatant, and the violence of it is entirely out of line with the situation. And honestly, I'm not sure whether I would be more or less disturbed if it were a police officer doing it. But as they continue to restrain Miss Lewis, I want to emphasize the point about the irresponsibility of the rifle that I began with. There are a full 2 minutes of time where the officer is moving in the rifle in every which way, entirely out of control, moving about the body of this prone woman as a large man sits on her. This entire incident could easily have gone an even worse direction without a lot of imagination. So many historical forces have converged to make that moment possible. The moment of 3 men holding a woman down, then taking additional action to hit her. The moment of 3 white men holding a black woman down and then taking additional action to hit her. You now have the opportunity to change that history. So as we sit on the precipice of a future you have a hand in shaping, I would like to ask you to take a moment of gratitude right now that we are not writing to you about yet another accidental death of an unarmed citizen at the hands of police. And I invite you to remember that there are no accidents when harm can be anticipated and prevented. And then I ask you, what are you going to do to repair this harm? What are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Second question will take a while to implement, but the first is simple. Insist that the charges against her be dropped and make it clear to the chief that his appointment depends on it. Thank you for your commitment to doing not what is easy, but what is right. Next is Ron Kester. At last week's committee of the whole meeting, several council members registered surprise about the continued outpouring of community concern and anger about the assault against Aaliyah Lewis by Urbana police. Other council members called for dialogue, not demands, from the public, as through the actions by the city in the preceding months were not all but designed to prevent dialogue and forestall independent critical inquiry. More to the point, why does it require concerned citizens doing our own investigating and fundraising, sharing evidence and expressing outrage in 3 minutes or less week after week for the city to acknowledge that it has a civil rights emergency on its hands? And once acknowledged, what's the city's plan for proceeding in a way that dignifies the gravity of the situation and the need for redress? I support the following, and I hope you do too. Charges should be dropped against Ms. Lewis. An apology should be issued to Ms. Lewis by the city of Urbana. An independent investigation of the incident should be conducted. Just as important as these recommendations, the city of Urbana needs to develop a plan to respond to civil rights emergencies in the future. A civil rights emergency response would not defer to arguments about guilt and punishment. It would proceed with an awareness that personal harm has been done, public safety has been compromised, and the community must come together to discuss solutions. As a community, we have inherited a history of racist violence and injustice. And though we didn't create these conditions, we are morally bound to respond to them when they appear. Many thanks. Next is Benjamin Stone. Dear council members and Mayor Marlin, I'm so excited about tonight's meeting. I'm really looking forward to hearing about how the charges against Aaliyah Lewis are being dropped. How great it will be to hear that announced. And when you tell us that the officers involved have been suspended, absolutely the right choice, and I'm so glad that you're finally taking that step. How proud I will be again of my city representatives and of my mayor, when, before the meeting ends, they tell us that an independent investigation was the right choice from the beginning, as opposed to an objectionable presentation by the police that repeatedly presented lies, sinned by omission, and literally violated Ms. Lewis's civil rights. That is this meeting tonight, right? I sure do hope you don't put off doing the right thing for yet another week, and another, and another. Make it tonight, friends. Next is Jane McClintock. For everyone's information, I have published what I hope is an impartial summary of events related to Good Friday beating of a young woman by Urbana police. It has links to various pieces of information and publications you might find helpful as you attempt to better understand the arrest and community response to it. I hope this will help community and council to have access to the relevant facts. It can be found at publiciucimc.org. I would like to express my continued encouragement for the council, mayor, and Urbana Police Department to apologize to the victim and do whatever is within their power to have all charges against her dropped. I also want to comment about the larger issue. We know she is not the only victim. The Urbana Police Department expressed on the 27th that what happened on the 10th is acceptable behavior. Public comment has been overwhelming and staunchly opposed to this view. We can no longer ignore the fact that the police department's idea of acceptable use of force is not in accordance with the community it serves. I would like to offer a few easy, actionable steps the city can take to begin to remedy this issue. I'm sure that as we continue this dialogue, we will be able, as a community, to come up with many more. 1, City Council and Civilian Police Review Board should review every use of force by the Urbana Police Department as a measure of transparency and accountability. 2, brandishing a weapon should be considered a use of force in Urbana, as it is in Champaign. 3, city staff should compile and publish a statistical report to help the council, community, and police department understand the demographics and neighborhoods most affected by police use of force in the last 5 years. We should continue to monitor and regularly review these statistics going forward if we are not already doing so. 4, pursuant to calls for dialogue and collaboration, City of Urbana should collaborate with community organizations to host a forum on police brutality and use of force. 5, the Urbana Police Department should adopt the Illinois Chiefs of Police and NAACP's 10 shared principles. 6, the Civilian Police Review Board should be given power to review police conduct when concerns are expressed without the need for onerous forms, affidavits, and notary publics. 7, the City Council should appoint a chief of police who will support the community's desire to combat racist violence in our city. These are just a few ideas of action we can take now. I am confident that as we come together as a community, united against bigotry and violence, we can do much more. As undoubtedly you are aware, Urbana is not alone in this. There have been horrific stories from around the country of racist violence in the last weeks. Let's stand out in our ability to respond productively to the prejudice and bigotry in our community. In doing so, I'm confident we will better serve ourselves, our neighbors, and our police officers. Next is Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, who state they're continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. And the last one I have is from Tanya Josek. I am writing to request that the city stop defending police actions, especially ones of violence. In reference to the incident on April 10th, I strongly encourage the city to drop all charges against victims of police brutality. The police were called to the scene to help this woman, and instead of helping her, she was beaten, jailed, and now faces unjust criminal charges. We are told the police are supposed to be there to help us when in need, but this incident, among more, proved this false. The police had no reason to engage this woman as the situation was already under control. The police also had no reason to have assault rifles present. There's never a need for assault rifles except for maybe extreme situations such as war or perhaps a mass shooting, neither of which fall into the situation at hand. It's clear the assault rifles were brought with the motive to assert dominance, which is especially inappropriate for the situation at hand. Again, I strongly encourage the city to drop all charges against victims of police brutality. This is unjust and cruel at a minimum. Okay, that's all I have.
Is there anyone on?
There are 2 raised hands.
Okay.
Tracy C. and then Christopher Hansen.
Tracy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Tracy Chong from Urbana. Tonight, I'm going to comment on some of the lies told to justify Urbana police officers' actions in beating and arresting Aaliyah Lewis. In their presentation on April 27th, Chief Seraphin and Lieutenant Norton justified the unhinged actions of Officers Cervantes, Ruff, and Coker by saying the officers were responding to a shots fired incident. Chief Seraphin brought up the term school shooter, mall shooter several times in an attempt to paint a picture of an active shooter scenario. However, listening to the 911 call, the caller reports that someone had accidentally shot himself. In the 911 call, the caller says, "There's a boy that had shot himself, and he's walking up and down the street with a gun in his hand. I just wanted to report that. Because when I was taking groceries in, we heard the loud gunshot, and he fell. But now he's up, stumbling, back and forth in the street, and some girl was behind him End quote. Does that sound like an active shooter scenario? From the call, it sounds like someone had accidentally shot themselves and was possibly hurt. Is this the typical response of Urbana Police officers to a medical type call, a report of someone potentially injured from an accidental gun discharge? It seems very dishonest of Chief Seraphin and the Urbana Police Department to spin this incident into a top-level active shooter threat in order to justify the force used to secure the area, and to justify classifying Lewis as an aggressive assailant. There's no mention of the bullet going over the heads of residents in the 911 call, which Mayor Marlin just told us in her update today. Mayor Marlin, why are you lying to citizens? Why do you keep perpetrating these lies? Had the picture of the situation been more like a medical call where a man had accidentally shot himself and was possibly hurt, there would be no doubt that the use of force and treatment of Ms. Lewis was against policy. So of course, Chief Seraphin had to lie and twist the scenario to justify the actions of his officers. My question to City Council members is this: are all of you okay with Urbana police officers appearing in court and twisting the story in the same way when they testify against Ms. Lewis? Are you okay with Urbana police officers committing perjury when testifying against Ms. Lewis? Mayor Marlin and City Council members, you've also attempted to wash your hands of any responsibility by saying that the city has no say over whether Ms. Lewis's charges are dropped and it is all up to the state's attorney, Julia Reeds. Simple question. Have any of you directly requested that the charges be dropped? And what was the response by Ms. Reeds? I would like to see each of you send a formal letter to the state's attorney requesting for charges against Ms. Lewis to be dropped. Thank you.
Christopher Hansen?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Christopher Hansen. I live in Urbana. I have been participating and engaging with the Urbana Civilian Police Review Board for the past year or so. I've submitted police complaints, and I issued the third ever complaint appeal in the 10-year history of the CPRB. And it is painfully obvious to me that the process does not work for citizens. I've expressed this numerous times at public input during CPRB meetings and through numerous emails to the CPRB members. The police complaint process is broken by design, and unscrupulous staff have been acting to block citizen access to the complaint process. And I'm speaking specifically about Todd Brent, Preston James, and Vasilia Clark. The CPRB has not been receiving copies of complaints and has not issued an annual report for 5 years. It's quite clear to me that the CPRB board members have not read their own ordinance and don't understand their own directive. I watched Chief Seraphin's presentation on the Alea Lewis arrest, and the way Seraphin tried to spin this is exactly how they handle every complaint. These people are professional spin masters, and this is how they approach complaints from citizens. There was no reason to classify this as an active shooter scenario. This was what sounded like a medical call from somebody who accidentally shot themselves, and there was never any indication that anyone was threatening anyone with a gun. Guns are, whether you like it or not, legal. And it turns out after the fact that he was carrying it illegally, but the point is he wasn't threatening anyone, and there was no reason to think that there was an active shooter situation. I also wanted to alert the council and the public that Chief Seraphin has creatively denied at least 5 or 6 police complaints in the past year alone, and I expect there have probably been a lot more denials. So these complaints are never actually reaching the CPRB because they're being stuffed by the police department before they can ever get there. I'd also like to make it known that in 2018, I publicly complained about both of the sergeants who were involved in the Lewis arrest. I'm talking about Michael P. Cervantes and James Corey Coker. Those complaints were from 2 separate incidents, and both were in regards to the officer's conduct while arresting young Black individuals. And one of those arrests was violent and resulted in the arrestee being injured. That boy was probably around 12 years old. These complaints landed on the desk of Mayor Marlin, and Marlin basically blew me off. So the city has been warned about these particular officers in the past and their tendency toward violent escalation, but the city never actually wants to deal with employee misconduct. And this is exactly the attitude that we heard from Sharice Hersey at last week's meeting when she very ignorantly blamed the victim for everything. And last, I want to understand more clearly from Mayor Marlin, what is this big meeting that you described? Was this recorded so that the public could review the meeting? And did you follow Open Meetings Act laws when this meeting took place? Thank you.
Thank you.
There's one more. Ben Jocelyn has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Hi there. I first want to say thanks for dropping or asking for things or alternatives to Elias's being charged with criminal charges. I, like Tracy, would like you to see taking it a step farther and asking for the charges to be formally dropped, and asking this and saying that the city, which is the person who the police officers who worked for the city when they had the charges, are against police officers, say it's our police officers and we'd like you to drop the charges. We think they're inappropriate. I think that's an absolutely responsible thing and reasonable thing for the city to do. I think that I'm glad that there's going to be an independent review, though at this point the review of the incident matters less to me than the review of the systems. I would love to see justice come for Aaliyah, but I also want to see justice come for all of the people who we continue to know. We arrest way too many people of color, specifically Black people in Urbana. The numbers are very clear from our jail and the video footage we now have. Plus, Christopher Hansen's testimony proves that this is something that's been going on for decades. Sorry, probably since the beginning of our town, because it has for all police forces. I also want to say that it's an absolute failure of leadership to put together a video that describes the police behavior as acceptable. To have police violence so clearly shown, to have so much citizen outreach say this is not okay, and to put together a video that says our police did exactly what they're expected to do is exactly the problem that we are facing. The problem is not that those officers didn't follow expectations. The problem is that our expectations are racist, abusive police behavior, and that cannot stand. It is now on is a burden placed on the city to say we demand something better and to put in place measures that make sure our police treat everybody in a way that they deserve to be treated. It is totally unacceptable that police officers showed up at the house of the person who videotaped this and asked for that footage to be removed and taken off of Facebook. That's beyond reprehensible and should be investigated. I think that broadly this falls into three categories. First, there's the pattern that we know from the facts beforehand. Then there's the incident. Now there's the response. And that response should not be to a single event in a single investigation. It should be to the pattern that we know exists and that this proves the case of. I do think it's very important that we see justice for Aaliyah Lewis. I think you should consider even paying for her legal defense, because frankly, you could be sued and you should be for it. But please also set a goal of having a non-racist police force. And I think the metric you should use is you should have regular reporting of the racial disparities of the police arrests and charges. And you should have a goal of our city having different racial representation from the population of the number of arrests should match the percentage of the racial demographics of the city. And that is what I would like to see happen, as well as absolute transparency about what's happening and to decrease the violence perpetrated and the lives ruined that are disproportionately affected by our police force at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the Urbana City Council? Okay. We'll move on to the financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This will be Elizabeth Hannon.
Muted. Oh, I'm unmuted now. So this is kind of a tricky subject to discuss, but I know that you've all been a little bit anxious to have an update. So the good news here is that because of all the hard work that we've done the past few years to bring our budget into line, to make it sustainable, we're in a better position to weather this increase than we would have been a few years ago. We have a healthy fund balance. I expect that we'll achieve that 20% goal by the end of this fiscal year. Our recurring expenditures are below our policy goal. And so this buys us time to consider our options. In terms of the economy, there's no doubt that retail sales have declined sharply, other than for necessary items like food and medicine. We're not seeing that yet in our revenues because it takes 3 months from the time a sale takes place until the city actually receives the sales tax revenue, but we will see that. Restaurants and hotels are closed or doing very minimal business. Interest rates are currently near zero. Unemployment is close to 15%, which is the highest it's been in my lifetime. A recession is almost certain, but that is something we kind of expected in our forecasting that would happen within the next few years. So as we started to take a look at this, some of the assumptions we used for our initial projections were that we might begin to return to normal in June, that a recovery would take 6 to 12 months. However, we're refining these assumptions. We're getting new information almost every day. More data will give us a chance to make a better forecast. So we're definitely going to have to revisit this as we start to see things kind of stabilize in one way or another. So in terms of the big picture, and I'm talking here about what I think is the best case, I'm expecting for fiscal year 21 that we will have a total revenue shortfall of more than $3 million, or close to 10% of our general fund budget. So to understand the impact of that, that's equivalent to about 40 positions. Now that's not to say that we would only fix that problem by cutting positions, but just to understand the scope. Cuts at that level would definitely affect programs and services. If this was a short term, what they're calling a V recession, sharp down and then pretty quickly sharp up, we could probably bridge that gap using fund balance. However, it increasingly looks like that won't be the case. And as we start to see recovery, it seems likely that consumers will be very cautious, which could in fact prolong the recovery. So a little more specific about some of the general fund revenues that are affected. Sales tax, I'm currently thinking it will be down about 13 to 15% next year, and that's our largest source of revenue in the general fund. Income tax, we're expecting it to be down 15%, and that's based on guidance from the Municipal League. We also expect that it's quite likely that because the state is also suffering, that they will divert more revenue from the local government distributive fund, which is the pot where income tax revenue goes. Video gaming is entirely shut down, so we'll be down considerably for the duration until that comes back. Local taxes, hotel, motel, food and beverage, we're going to see sharp drops in all of those. We're writing fewer ordinance violations and notices to appear in the police department, so we'll see reduced fine revenue. We'll probably see a drop in building permits. We're not currently enforcing parking, so we're losing parking fine revenue that we would otherwise receive. And that's just in the general fund. So we're also expecting to see about a 30% drop off in motor fuel tax revenue. And all of that is dedicated to transportation improvements. So that's going to have a significant impact. So some actions that we're taking now, we have implemented a hiring freeze to preserve our options for cuts. There will be some very limited exceptions for necessary positions. We're also seeking federal reimbursement for some costs related to the pandemic. And we're taking, as you may have noticed, some additional time to consider the proposed budget in light of what's happening. So from here, we will present a budget that includes those preliminary revenue reductions probably on June 1st, which is a little bit delayed. We'll come back late summer, probably August, maybe even into September, to talk about an updated forecast once we have better or more stable kind of information about the situation. And then at that point, we may need to consider mid-year budget reductions, hopefully focusing on positions that will be vacant due to the hiring freeze. So that's a very quick rundown of a very big and complicated topic. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Jared.
Elizabeth, before getting into any of the further specifics, do you think that there's any way you could send a weekly update to us since things are changing so quickly?
So I could send you some kind of update, but we're not able to update the revenue projections as fast as we're getting new information.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be comprehensive, but just things we should know, things we should be keeping our eyes on when you hear news or you hear something from the municipal league or, you know, the state makes a move and you know it's going to affect our budget. Just something to help keep us informed as we go along, week in and week out. It doesn't need to be comprehensive. Just like, oh, hey, this happened this week. You guys should be aware this will probably have an effect. Here's a short summary of how I can see it happening.
Yeah, sure. I can do that. It might not be every week if there's nothing happening.
It's right. Sure. I guess as developments warranted.
Sure.
I would add, Jared, you should be getting the weekly updates from the Illinois Municipal League from Brad Cole. Are you not?
I do.
Okay, that's where we get a lot of our information. Mary Ellis.
So Elizabeth, you mentioned a lot of different sources that the city brings in: video gaming, motor fuel tax, et cetera. If you bundle all that up together, is that the $3 million reduction that you're talking about, or does that impact other funds as well? Besides the
So it's $3 million in the general fund, plus the motor fuel tax is impacting two different capital funds. It's impacting the state motor fuel tax fund and the local motor fuel tax fund. And I don't have that handy at the moment, but that's, certainly hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So we're talking about three funds in general, right? The motor fuel, which goes to capital improvements for roads and so forth, which you estimated 30% drop for next year. Okay. And then the $3 million kind of encompasses all of the hotel, motel, the video gaming, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I would say that if there's a fourth bill coming out of the federal government, mayors all over the country are lobbying really, really hard to have relief to cities to directly compensate for these losses in revenues. And the federal aid that's come out so far has not provided anything toward cities for relief in that respect. There's money for some PPE, and we got some dollars through CDBG, but the billions and billions and billions of dollars that have been lost in just, which you just heard, is not yet been addressed in any of the aid packages coming out of the government. So I'm going to share some information with you, and it'd be great if council members could send notes to the U.S. senators, congressmen, to really get behind this aid if a fourth package comes through. Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question on the hiring freeze. You mentioned there were a few positions that you would go ahead and hire for. Can you specify what those are?
So I can't at the moment, but one of them was the one the mayor mentioned earlier, which was the position that Preston James held.
Okay.
As well as some in public works as well. So, but we'll review each one individually. Carol, did you want to weigh in on that?
I guess what I would say is that the hiring freeze impacts positions that become vacant after on May 1st or thereafter. So positions that have been vacant for a while are not included, although we're not automatically going to be filling all of them, but they're in a different category. The ones that are definitely going to be tightly controlled are those that become vacant after May 1, or that became vacant.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, so I infer from that Director of Public Works and Traffic Engineer are both still active searches.
Director of Public Works, and we're not necessarily going to have a specific traffic engineer going forward. We're probably going to move to more generalized positions, but yeah, city engineer is still a position we're recruiting for.
Dennis.
I was wondering if you had any projections about potential retirements that are going to be coming up the next year that might open up savings if these individuals' positions are not filled again during the year.
So we can't really control or require people to let us know when they're going to retire.
Okay.
That potentially gets at some savings if a very senior employee retires and somebody comes in at the bottom and kind of starts their way up. But in the long term, it's a fairly small amount of savings from that kind of thing.
Eric?
I guess one quick question. How big an impact will the decision of the university to either bring students back on campus or not? That should be a fairly substantial effect, I would guess.
Yeah, that's very significant to us because that's another 40,000 people in the community that, go out to eat and shop and, spend money in the community.
Pay rent, yeah.
That too.
It's huge. You can't you can't underestimate the impact of the university in this community, but.
And that's 40,000 increment, 40,000 difference if people come back or not?
That's a ballpark figure based on their enrollment. Some of those people are probably here now, but.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, stay tuned. Things change day by day. We'll move on to Andrea Rudy with talking about the business outreach. Of course, one of the keys to a phased recovery is supporting the local business community in their plans for reopening in whatever form that takes to do safely over the next few months. So she'll be giving an update on that, and also status of the beginning laying plans for the comp plan effort.
I think just before Andrea gets started, that there's a slide that Jason has that she wanted to show while she makes this presentation. If he could put that up. Here we go. All right.
Thank you, Mayor Marlin and council members. I would like to address the comprehensive plan process and then obtain your feedback and answer any questions that you may have this evening. The current COVID-19 public health emergency and resulting economic crisis has significantly impacted many of our city's businesses and residents. This experience will not only test our resiliency as a community, it will have a meaningful impact on the development of our updated comprehensive plan. While a long-term high-level plan for the city is always important, it is especially critical during uncertain times and emergencies. The policies set forth in the comprehensive plan will unify our city as well as address unprecedented circumstances and their ongoing effects. Our updated comprehensive plan will serve as a critical anchor to help the city move forward in its goals based on its underlying principles, which remain unchanged during unexpected and traumatic events. The diagram you see before you is a roadmap for our comprehensive plan process. At each milestone, the City Council will be kept abreast of the plan's progress and be engaged in meaningful discussion. Public outreach and engagement is critical to the plan's development, and as you will see, is woven in throughout this roadmap. The first milestone, the initial allocation of resources, was completed at the March 16, 2020 City Council meeting. Based on current fiscal constraints, as Elizabeth has outlined for us this evening, we will move ahead with current dedicated staff and resources and evaluate project requirements in a very cost-conscious way at each milestone. Currently, milestone 2, determine framework and stakeholders, and also gather and analyze data, are being addressed simultaneously. An inclusive stakeholder list is being developed to ensure inclusive representation from constituencies. In addition, over 30 existing plans and studies produced by the city and area agencies have been reviewed to identify relevant policies and actions for potential inclusion in the updated comprehensive plan. During this time of economic uncertainty due to COVID-19 pandemic, information is also being gathered from Urbana businesses on the impact the governor's executive orders are having on our city's businesses, both large and small. The purpose of this extensive business outreach initiative by the city staff is to garner individual business feedback, to identify trends, and to ensure our city's resources, such as CDBG funds, are effectively allocated. Also, we want to make sure businesses know of and have access to available business assistance programs, including PPP funding. This information will assist us to make sure businesses know of, this information will assist us with the city's resiliency and preparedness for the future natural disasters as part of our 20-year comprehensive plan. This past week, the mayor and staff have made 31 calls to Urbana businesses. The overall response from our business community has been appreciative of the city's concern and having a point of contact at the city should they have any future issues. We are also using this outreach opportunity to inform our business owners about the comprehensive plan rewrite and ask what level of involvement they would like to have. Many have expressed interest in being actively involved in issues based on working groups. The work product expected from Milestone 3 is a community profile, and this profile will describe existing conditions, including demographics, developmental patterns, existing land use and other policies, snapshots from various master plans and action plans, for example, the stormwater, bicycle, climate change, etc., and available community services. Milestone 4, identifying opportunities, issues, and challenges, will involve extensive public engagement, ensuring accessibility and inclusiveness to secure perspective from a cross-section of our entire constituency. COVID-19 social distancing practices have encouraged the use of non-face-to-face communication and provided us with alternative methods to engage the public that will ensure inclusiveness, including online services, webinars, online meetings and focus groups, and social media feedback. Securing this public's perspective regarding the range of opportunities, issues, and challenges facing our community is critical, not just to develop a sound plan, but to build support to ensure the plan's ultimate adoption and implementation. Staff will then review the public engagement feedback with the goal of identifying significant opportunities, issues, and challenges facing the community as identified by the City of Urbana's residents and businesses. The resulting themes will be the foundation for our comprehensive plan and be the basis for articulating our community's vision, which is Milestone 5. What our community envisions for the city will provide direction for the development of the comprehensive plan's goals and objectives. A draft vision statement will then be presented via community forums for public feedback and further refinement. Because the vision is integral to the comprehensive plan, we will ask the council to endorse or otherwise adopt the vision as an important interim step. The next milestone, 6, formulate goals and objectives, will, as stated here, build upon the city's vision statement, set financial, operational, and strategic problem solving and development goals for each theme. There will be specific measurable objectives to achieve each goal, along with an implementation schedule. A draft of the comprehensive plan, milestone 7, will be prepared. Each theme featured in the plan will provide an overview of the specific planning assumptions, goals, and objectives of each theme. At milestone 8, community feedback, the comprehensive plan draft will be circulated to stakeholders and the public at large for their review. Comments will be addressed prior to the required public hearing and formal review by the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission's comprehensive plan recommendations will then be submitted with the final draft plan, milestone 9, for City Council approval, along with a recommended schedule for implementation. And the final milestone, implementation and monitoring, will be an ongoing process on the comprehensive plan, will be closely monitored, and an annual status report will be presented to City Council and the community. The plan will serve as a guide for the outcomes we seek for our community in alignment with the values we have expressed and adopted. Rather than focusing on a list of basics to be accomplished, the annual status report will be focused on progress toward our goals and identifying ongoing impediments to achieving those goals. And in closing, the city staff will be committed to support the comprehensive plan so that Urbana businesses and residents will have the support needed to seize the opportunities and tackle the challenges ahead. And I thank you for this opportunity to present this roadmap and would like to entertain any questions you might have and provide any feedback for us going forward.
Any questions for Andrea? Mary Alice, and then Dennis.
Yes, thank you very much for presenting that. I didn't see that in my packet. It would be great if that could be emailed to us or physically mailed to us. Either way is fine. I did have a question about identifying stakeholders. So we had a lot of neighborhood organizations within our city, and I'm wanting your thoughts on how you're going to incorporate stakeholders that aren't businesses, that are community groups, that are also neighborhood associations, et cetera.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, we were talking about businesses tonight just because of the COVID virus, and we've been putting some emphasis on that. But the stakeholders list that we've put together is very extensive. It does include all the neighborhood associations, different agencies in the community. So it's a broad cross range of all our constituencies. If there's a group that you specifically want to make sure that we include, please send that to me and I will make sure they are. I'm hoping that they already are, however.
And how would people expect to be communicated with all these different groups? Are you planning on, sorry, go ahead.
No, we're working through that process now. As I mentioned, COVID-19 has provided us with several different ways of communicating, which I think will be the normal going forward. I really feel like if one positive comes out of this is that we'll now be thinking of better ways to reach our constituents that maybe haven't been part of our processes in the past. So we're looking at ways to use church groups to reach different constituencies, as well as social media, webinars. I just participated in a different forum than I ever have, where I got a call on the telephone and we all listened to a webinar that way. We didn't see it, but we were listening to the dialogue. So we'll be exploring many ways to outreach. And again, I think COVID-19 has really forced us to do that. And I think in the long term, it's going to be a better way of communicating.
Thank you.
Dennis. Can you unmute yourself, Dennis?
Thank you. Yes, my question was a little bit like Mary Alice's as far as concern of community outreach for public input at an early stage rather than waiting to present to the public things that have already been drafted during earlier stages by maybe community groups or staff and other work groups. And I would really encourage the city to hold a general public meeting inviting all community members, not necessarily associated with any particular group, but whatever individuals want to put input into their vision for the community, their vision for the city, to have that opportunity earlier rather than later, when a lot of goals are already being formulated by the planners.
I appreciate that comment, and that's fully our intent, is to really create a constituent-driven comprehensive plan, and so that it comes from the grassroots. And to do that, we know that we are going to be holding some community forums to get that type of feedback. We're gathering data of first, so that we can formulate some background, and we'll be providing that information to our citizens so that they can see some of the things that have been planned in these past few years, so that then they can make recommendations to us. So we really do intend to reach out at the very beginning to get that kind of input.
That's very important, because there are people who are very creative thinkers in our community who may want to put input in, but who may have fallen through the sieve of community groups and associations which you might be trying to reach out initially. So an open forum at some point in the earlier stages, I think, is going to be very useful to us. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Carol wanted to weigh in, and then Jared.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people understand the reason why we're reporting out tonight on the effort about contacting the businesses is we took the opportunity, since we wanted to reach out to businesses and find out about their status, their challenges, and so forth, to use that contact point to also talk about the comprehensive plan, because we're very fortunate in one sense that we're contemplating the future of Urbana at a time when it's very much I think up for debate, not because of a change that has happened about our values, but because of these external circumstances related to the pandemic and the actions of the university and so forth. So I don't want people to think that because we're reaching out to the business community that we won't have that same kind of outreach to other groups. The business community happens to be first because we were doing this outreach associated with trying to assess the level of damage that's been done to our financial position by for the things that Elizabeth was talking about, all these local taxes and so forth, to actually talk to people, find out what their plans are, to find out, whether they're operating at all, whether they plan to come back, if they're not operating now, and there's things that we could do. So I just don't want people to think that same level of engagement isn't going to happen for other groups. It was just we took advantage of the opportunity to talk to businesses about the comprehensive plan right now.
Great. Jared?
Andrea, question that you just made me think of as you're going through this is, we got the overview and kind of the idea of how we're going to get some stakeholders in the long-term prospect, but I didn't hear, maybe I missed it, next step from this particular report. What are we looking at for when we're going to see you again, or when we're going to have an update on where we're going next?
Okay. One of the things that I plan is that every milestone we'll be giving an update to the council. There are different points where we'll need approval from a council to go forward. For instance, we mentioned the vision. We want the council's approval and sign off on that before we even go any further in talking with the community. But at every one of these milestones, I'll be giving an update.
Okay.
If I could just also add something there, the full effort that the real kickoff of the comprehensive plan effort was always intended to start with the beginning of the new fiscal year. And we had talked about the fact that Lily Wilcock is going to be assigned to work on the comprehensive plan full time. So we're still in the, you know, in the foundation laying stages at this point. And, you know, Andrea has become fully immersed in the all the plans that have been put forward in the past for the city, the plans that are being developed right now. She's getting really familiar with all the different stakeholder groups, but the real robust effort of moving the comprehensive plan through the stages of this roadmap really won't kick in until July 1st. So I just wanted to manage your expectations on that level. And there's also reason why on the roadmap there aren't dates. And that's largely a function of the fact that, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And, you know, we expect this process to be organic and that we might, you know, I actually love the fact that Andrea used a roadmap as the metaphor for this, because we expect that there might be detours along the way, or that some legs of the journey will take longer than we thought. But, you know, it really is about identifying who we are and who we want to be as a city. And that means that we have to hear from everyone, and we have to have a vision that the comprehensive plan is based on, that's authentic to people that live here, and that, you know, that we have some high level of consensus around. So that's going to take a while.
Mary Alice.
One thing that I wanted to say, and I don't think that you've forgotten them by any means, but I do think that sometimes when we are planning, we're talking about city plans, we have a tendency to not think specifically and targetedly to the students in our community. And as we've talked about today, there's tens of thousands of students in our community, and I think it's going to take a special effort to get them involved in this process. We have Orchard Downs, which is probably the largest family housing for students here at the U of I. We also have a lot of undergraduate students who live in all the dorms around here. So I just kind of wanted to put a plug into making a special effort to reach out to those students.
I appreciate that as well. And not only college students, but also our K through 12 students. We'd like to get a feel for that. And so I've investigated different groups that we can outreach to hit those target markets. I appreciate you bringing up Orchard Downs, because I think that's a critical access point for, you know, the grad students and their families especially. And so again, if there are any specific groups that you feel might fall under the radar, please let me know, because I want to make sure that they're on our list.
Great. Is that Charisse?
Yes. Just to piggyback on what Mary Alice was saying about Orchard Downs, there are also two housing developments here in my ward too that have with one north and one south, I believe, that house a lot of students. So another just area for you to think about.
I do actually have those on my list, so I appreciate you mentioning that.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Did you want to talk about the business outreach, or was this part of your?
Well, I mentioned that briefly in our efforts towards the comprehensive plan. We're getting some great feedback, and it's amazing the resiliency of our business community, because no one is really complaining or grousing about the situation. They're trying to just dig in and keep their heads above water and try to find ways that they can help in this reopening as that happens. So they're very positive. They're offering feedback to us. I think one of the biggest concerns they have is just getting open, of course. And they either themselves, but if they're an essential business, they want to make sure their clients get reopened. We're hearing great feedback about the PPP program, the funding. Almost everyone that I've talked with, if they applied for it, they received the funding. and it's been extremely helpful in preventing them from laying off people and keeping our workforce employed. So, but we're hearing some of the questions we have on our list. All of us are working from a script. However, we deviate. It's really supposed to be a conversation to show the businesses our concern, and then trying to get feedback from them on how we can use our resources, what we have, to help them. Many are still without masks, and so there's a community effort through the EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, making a list of all the businesses that are in need of masks and doing some bulk purchasing to provide them. Another concern from the business community is daycare. They really can't get fully open unless the daycares are in operation, and that's a big concern. People cannot come back to work if they still have children at home, and so that's something that as a community we need to be looking at. The other topic that I'm hearing a lot is really seeing if the city and other community groups can really push towards getting testing, the antibody testing, so that we can know which workers are safe to go back to work. Because the businesses are concerned, they don't want their employees coming into a work environment that's not safe. So having that testing would be critical as well. And so these are some of the feedback we're hearing. And like I said, the overall attitude from the business community is positive, and that they're trying to work together to try to find ways to make it safe for their workers and customers to come back into the business. And just being optimistic, but yet knowing that it's going to be a tough road ahead.
And I would add another theme that we're hearing is some of the new things that people are trying. They've discovered that works, and they're going to continue doing that in the future. So, the idea that people were forced to become creative and try new things has led to new ways of doing business that they think they'll continue from here on out. So we may have to change some things to accommodate that, especially in the liquor code. But that's the nature of this. Is everyone is adapting, and we're all going to have to look at new ways of doing things. Eric, you got a comment?
Yeah. Is there anything as a city that we can do about COVID testing, or is that entirely up to the public health district?
Well, the city is works very closely with the public health district, our county-wide partners, the local hospitals, and all that. So testing is become more available to people, and they've expanded the folks who can get it. So that's a good thing. But yes, we're working very closely. And we were on a call for an hour and a half this morning, convened by the chancellor, with mostly community leaders, community organizations, and with updates from many different areas. But underlying all of that is going to be the importance, no matter how much testing we have, how we look in 3 months or 6 months, underlying everything we do are those same basics that we heard about at the very beginning, which is the importance of hand washing and using face covering and physical distancing. So no matter what way a business opens, that's going to be a fundamental part of their way of doing business from here on out. And so I was on the phone with a business today, and they're redesigning their dining room, they're redesigning their service area, they're getting rid of their self-serve soda fountain, it's these basic hygiene behaviors that we've been told to adopt are going to be fundamental and critical to our success going forward.
And if I can add, there are all the community groups are working together. We have a meeting twice a week that's led by the Economic Development Corporation, but I think there are probably 30 different stakeholders that are on these calls and working together, sharing information, trying to address these different concerns that are raised, whether it's the mask or just the daycare issues, all of these things are being addressed as a whole. And so everyone really is working together. We're not duplicating resources in our communities to try to make this happen. We get updates from, in the case of Rantoul participates in those meetings, and they're giving us updates on the processing plant, just things to for everyone to expect and try to address as we go along. So it's been a very cohesive effort in the entire Champaign County.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, I have a proclamation. It's been a few weeks since I read a proclamation. So this is a proclamation by the mayor of the city of Urbana, Illinois. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas the city of Urbana has a historic preservation plan and currently has designated 18 local historic landmarks and 3 historic districts. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it's important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas this May, in light of the current situation regarding safe social interaction, the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission is promoting the enjoyment of our local historic resources through self-guided and virtual resources in observance of National Historic Preservation Month. Now, therefore, I, Diane Wolfe Marlin, Mayor of the City of Urbana, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2020 as National Historic Preservation Month in the City of Urbana, Illinois, and call upon the people of Urbana to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. And this is dated May 2020. And a special thanks to the members of the Historic Preservation Commission and the staff who support that very important commission. And thanks, Andrea, for that excellent report, and Elizabeth for yours as well. Unfinished business is the next item on the agenda. I don't believe we have any. We move on to reports of standing committees. It would be Committee of the Whole from Bill Brown.
Yeah, we met last week as the Committee of the Whole and forwarded 4 items to the City Council, all with recommendation for approval. First was ordinance number 2020-04-025, an ordinance approving a special use permit for 205 North High Cross Road, OSF Healthcare, plan case number 2399 SU20 for a medical office building. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Bill Brown, seconded by Jared. Any discussion? Dennis.
Just want to thank staff for doing a little bit of clarification work concerning the crosswalk that was discussed during the Committee of the Whole, and affirming the fact that there would be a sidewalk as part of the development project that connects Barringer Commons and to the north with the Aldi's sidewalk that exists already.
Okay, any other comments? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown?
Yes.
Colebrook?
Yes.
Percy?
Can you turn your audio on, Charisse?
No.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Can you turn your audio on, Mary Alice?
Sorry, yes.
That motion passes.
Next is resolution number 2020-05-021R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of an Illinois Arts Council Agency, IACA, grant for a youth employment project. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Bill Brown, seconded by Mary Alice. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Colebrook,
Yes.
Percy,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
and Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Bill?
Next is ordinance number 2020-05-026, an ordinance approving an amendment to a redevelopment agreement by and between the City of Urbana, Champaign County, Illinois, and Green Street Realty Company of Illinois. First Amendment, 200 block of South Vine Street, 300 block of East Green Street. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Jared. Any discussion? Dennis?
Yeah, I'm not against having the extension of time. If it turns out that it assists Green Street Realty in creating a better and more well thought out and carefully planned project, I'm very pleased to do that. I still want to voice my concern about what I consider is a sort of a degradation of the materials that they're going to be using. I still feel, as I said last week, that I kind of feel like we got a switch on a kind of a significant aspect of the project because they're using a different material that I think doesn't look as handsome. And when you would consider the fact that this is going to be the first significant residential development in our downtown, and we're not even getting a completely bricked side front facade, that to use the metal vertical paneling that they're suggesting as a replacement material does have my concern. I don't want the interior of the complex to look like a sardine tin. I think that materials really suggest quality, and people can tell quality materials when they see them. So I still suggest to the developer to consider the effect it's going to have if he makes a significant change in the materials that are being used for the building.
Any other comments? Jared?
I agree, Dennis. I mean, but I think Chris is going to do the right thing, and he'll put what looks best on there. And the longer lifetime on it, hopefully, will get us better value out of them. But I think it's going to be great. Hopefully, hopefully I'm right. Hopefully I'm right. And I think that Chris is he's got the right eye out for there. He's not going to want to make a bad impression for his first build in downtown Urbana. So that's my only comment, but I'm supporting this.
Any other comments? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Colebrook,
Yes.
Percy,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts,
I guess a cautious yes.
and Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Last item on the agenda.
There's one more. Oh, yeah. Ordinance number 2020-05-027, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing number of Class C liquor licenses for Mama Tried LLC, doing business as the Rose Bowl Tavern, 106 North Race Street, Urbana, Illinois. For the committee, I move approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Eric. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown,
Yes.
Colebrook,
Yes.
Percy,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
and Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Bill. Reports of special committees. Anything to report? Reports of officers. Let me go to my second page here. Okay. New business, one item, resolution number 2020-05022R, which is a resolution accepting a coronavirus emergency supplemental funding fiscal year 2020 grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance, Urbana Police Department. And I think I saw Lieutenant or Deputy Chief Searles here.
Yep, I'm here.
There you are.
So on March the 30th of 2020, the Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance released information related to grants in the state of Illinois and actually all across the country. And in part of the process, they selected specific cities to receive designated funds. In the case of Urbana, we're selected to receive, if we made an successful application, $35,119. I submitted the application on April the 21st of 2020, and the federal government in lightning quick speed approved it on April the 24th. So what this resolution is accepting the grant.
Can we get a motion and a second, and then, well, I guess any questions for Deputy Chief Searles? Okay, can we get a motion, please?
I can make a motion.
All right.
I'll move that we approve resolution number 2020-05022R, a resolution accepting a COVID emergency supplemental funding for fiscal year 2020 grant from the United States Department of Justice of Office of Justice Programs, the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Bill Colbrook. Any discussion? Bill Brown.
Yeah, in the memo, you mentioned that this expectation is the vast majority will be used to reimburse for expenditures related to purchase of personal protective equipment, new cleaning methods, supplies, new technological and communication equipment. So will this be enough to cover that?
The short answer is no. The receipts that I've gotten so far, we've got about $25,000 in expenditures. I fully anticipate that other expenses related to COVID-19 will exceed the balance, but this takes a little bit of the sting out of those costs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Colbrook?
Yes.
Percy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before this council, I would say this meeting is adjourned. Yes, Dennis. Oh, you had your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody that be an open forum tomorrow evening to discuss the impact of the MCOR project for Green Street in our community, and people may want to tune in for that to learn, get updates about the project. And we do see that the Green Street's being going to be removed in sections, and people will not be able to travel up and down the street. So anybody who is watching that and has questions about the placement of the sidewalks, tree removals along the corridor, should be tuning in tomorrow night.
Is anyone on who can give time and place for that? Well, we know it'll be on Zoom, but
yeah.
So, if anybody that's interested can go on to the urbana.illinois.us website and search on MCOR, and you'll find the Zoom information. The Zoom room will be open from 4 to 6 p.m. and then there'll be brief presentations made at 4, and then the same presentation will be made again at 5. So people don't need to anticipate blocking all that time, but you can literally wander in whenever, and if you want to hear the presentation, as I said, it'll be on those 2 hours. Otherwise, you can just ask random questions if you come in, when nothing is being discussed. So.
And it's possible for people to send questions in ahead of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can send questions in ahead of time to make sure that answers get prepared, or if people ask more complicated questions on the fly, then we can get back to folks. And I want to thank Dennis for reminding people about this. I should have done it myself. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right. With no further business, this meeting's adjourned, and stay well, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Night.